Trick questions are a time-tested way to trip up our enemies. Sometimes called gotcha questions, these are questions designed to throw our intended victim into a bout of uncertainty or to force our victim into saying something controversial, something they'll regret. Rest assured, it doesn't just happen to our people, though. It's a favored tactic on all sides of the political and religious divides, and it's been a tactic used for centuries on end. In today's episode, two different groups try this very tactic on Jesus with disappointing results. At least, disappointing for these two groups. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Wednesday, April 5th, 2023. You'll instantly recognize both of today's trick questions. In the first, the Pharisees try to trip Jesus up with a question about paying taxes to Caesar. And in the second, the Sadducees, who, unlike the Pharisees, didn't believe in the resurrection of the dead, try to trip him up with an apparently unsolvable paradox. But even though we easily recognize both episodes, we often fail to see them in their original context, which is the ongoing and escalating series of conflicts between Jesus and the religious authorities in Jerusalem. Keep in mind here that when we talk about the religious authorities, we're not talking about people who agreed with each other, let alone routinely put up a united front. As far as we can tell, this many centuries removed from the action, the two primary groups holding religious authority in Jerusalem were the Pharisees and the Sadducees. We say their names together often enough that we could be excused for thinking of them as being virtually one and the same, but not so. They were divided, sometimes bitterly. Obviously, I can't give a detailed description of each group and their differences, but it is important for understanding today's episodes to know just a little bit about each. The Pharisees were a culturally conservative group, concerned to keep Judaism pure from outside influences. At the time, the main cultural pressure was from Greek culture, ironically the dominant culture of the Roman Empire at the time. You can see this concern in the first of today's episodes. And it says, "Then the Pharisees went and plotted to entrap him in what he said. So they sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians, saying, 'Teacher, we know that you are sincere and teach the ways of God in accordance with truth and show deference to no one, for you do not regard people with partiality. Tell us then, what do you think? Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not?' But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, 'Why are you putting me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin used for the tax.' And they brought him a denarius. Then he said to them, 'Whose head is this, and whose title?' They answered, 'The emperor's.' Then he said to them, 'Give therefore to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's.' When they heard this, they were amazed, and they left him and went away." The Pharisees' question, you see, attempts to box Jesus in and choose between strict adherence to Judaism and obeying Roman law. Clearly, they failed in their immediate objective. Next, it was the Sadducees' turn. The Sadducees were a socially more progressive group than the Pharisees. Unlike the Pharisees, they weren't opposed in principle to adapting Judaism to cultural forces. They tended as a group to occupy a higher place on the economic ladder than the Pharisees, and they were for the most part the custodians of the temple, including all of the practices relating to temple sacrifices. But they rejected the idea of the resurrection of the dead, because they only accepted the Torah, Genesis through Deuteronomy, as scripture, and any mention of the resurrection in what we now call the Old Testament falls in portions outside the Torah. You can plainly hear their perspective in their challenge to Jesus. The same day some Sadducees came to him, saying, "There is no resurrection of the dead." And they asked him a question, saying, "Teacher, Moses said, if a man dies childless, his brother shall marry the widow and raise up children for his brother." Now there were 7 brothers among us. The first married and died childless, leaving the widow to his brother. The second did the same, and also the third, down to the 7th. Last of all, the woman herself died. In the resurrection, whose wife of the 7 will she be? For all of them had married her. Jesus answered them, "You are wrong, because you know neither the Scriptures nor the power of God. For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven. And as for the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what was said to you by God? I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." He's the God not of the dead, but of the living. And when the crowd heard it, they were astounded at his teaching. Jesus' answer to the Sadducees manages to do 2 things. First, he lodges the resurrection firmly in the Torah. And second, he challenges the Sadducees on their very understanding of the Torah itself, a direct and pointed challenge to their authority. At one level, Jesus has cleverly avoided the traps set by both groups. But in doing so, he has also upped the ante, so to speak, in the conflict between himself and the authorities. And as we'll see, this conflict is set to boil over. Tomorrow, Jesus gathers one last time with his disciples. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.